Good. I'll call this second electronic meeting, first regular council meeting to order. And ordinarily we would rise for the invocation, but I'm going to ask the clerk to provide the invocation. We can all remain seated. Madam Clerk.
We meet to serve our community and endeavor to be worthy custodians of all that has been entrusted to us. Let us be concerned only for what will promote good government. May we bring to our council chamber minds that think and hearts that feel, so that in our deliberations we may display imagination, wisdom, and courage, and the will to do our work for the good of all.
Thank you. And we begin this meeting by acknowledging that the land on which we all gather in various locations is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Mississaugas of the New Credit, and the Anishinaabe people. Madam Clerk, the roll call.
All members of council are present, Your Worship.
Thank you. So I've got a few brief announcements and then a message. The first is that April the 19th to 25th is National Volunteer Week, and we have a resolution on our agenda later on which will recognize that. April the 20th, April 22nd, which is Wednesday, is the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. And so although we can't formally gather, I would hope that residents would take the opportunity to do something friendly to our environment on that particular day. April the 28th is the National Day of Mourning, and later on during the agenda, I'll be asking councillors to move and second a resolution for a proclamation of National Day of Mourning and to lower the flags at half-mast. And then finally, I have a message that I wanted to provide in terms of an update to the community and councillors. It's now just over a month since the Premier of Ontario announced a state of emergency for the province. Since that time, the number of cases and deaths from COVID-19 have mounted. However, today, there was encouraging news about the flattening of the curve, a slowdown in the number of cases, and an indication that the efforts to contain the virus are having an impact. This is the result of the stringent measures required by the federal and provincial governments since mid-March. The sacrifices we have all been asked to make to protect each other have been working. However, both the Prime Minister and the Premier expressed caution today about easing those measures too soon. Even in the face of this promising news, the frontline workers, the doctors, nurses, PSWs, first responders, store clerks, bylaw enforcement officers, essential workers remain overwhelmed. Long-term care homes and retirement residences remain in precarious jeopardy. The situation continues to evolve and restrictions will be gradually eased. However, we need to continue to be vigilant. As I've said before, this situation is not about any one of us, it is about all of us. The actions of each of us have an impact on how all of us will survive the pandemic and how quickly we can return to a semblance of normal life. I want to comment on several issues that appear to be most on the minds of our community. But I would also ask that you, for specific and detailed information, go to the Town of Fort Erie website, forterie.ca, which has a wealth of information and updates relative to this current crisis. With respect to seasonal residents, I've confirmed with the Regional Director General of the Canada Border Service Agency that her forces continue to follow the protocol adopted since the federal government announced last month restrictions on travel across the Canada-US border. Only essential travel is permitted, such as truck drivers with essential goods, essential workers, and returning nationals or landed immigrants. Returning Canadians are required to self-isolate for 14 days. Those who are working on either side of the border are to go to work and return home directly. Some of these individuals are permitted to drive American plated vehicles. However, if you see someone who appears to be violating the protocol and you have information to permit enforcement of the protocol, you should contact the town and/or Canada Border Services Agency to lodge a complaint. Short-term rentals are not permitted to operate by provincial directive unless for bookings after April the 4th for accommodations related to essential need. That means that vacationers should not be coming into town for short stays. Seasonal residents who live elsewhere in Ontario have been encouraged by the federal and provincial governments to remain in their home communities. That is, stay home. Shirkston Shores has been closed to all but those Canadian residents who maintain their permanent home in Canada there. The town of Fort Erie can be contacted at 905-871-1600 or by email by going to the website forterie.ca. The Niagara Region can be contacted at 905-984-3690 or by going to its website, niagararegion.ca. And Canada Border Services can be contacted at 905-354-5137. Beaches, boat launches, trails, parks, and playgrounds. For the time being, the beaches, boat launches, and playgrounds in town are closed. Parks and recreational trails are open, but individuals must maintain social distancing. We are aware that people would like to walk the beaches, but I remind everyone that the town-owned beaches are primarily 66-foot road allowances. The exceptions being Bay Beach, which is 1,000 feet of beach front, and Waverly Beach, about 200 feet. We're also aware that boaters would like to get out on the lake or river. We continue to monitor the situation and will make decisions changing the status in the context of safety and adherence to social distancing rules. In the meantime, the public is permitted to walk, run, cycle, and get fresh air, but not congregate in our passive parks and on the recreational trails in town. With respect to public health, we have received many expressions of concern about the amount of information being shared by Niagara Regional Public Health Agency. While the information displayed on its website has improved over the past week, there remains important data that could and should be shared. The number of tests conducted in Niagara, results and pending results, specifics as to the cases in long-term care homes and retirement residences, a breakdown of cases by municipality. I have corresponded with the acting Chief Medical Officer of Health for Niagara Region, voicing my concerns in this regard. I know that Regional Councillor Insina has expressed similar concerns. They will be raised at the Regional Council meeting scheduled for Thursday this week. The landfill site. The local landfill site on Pettit Road is operated by the region. It is open for essential disposals with a variety of qualifications, really too many to get into right now. I urge you to go to the region's website to ascertain its availability for use. There has also been a recent update today by the town of Fort Erie with respect to the landfill, but for more detailed information, go to the region website. In the meantime, Regional Councillor Insina and I will be raising concerns about the restrictions imposed at the landfill site during a time when people are doing work around their homes because of federal and provincial directives and need to be able to dispose of refuse. Town operations. The town continues most of its operations, including processing, planning, and building applications, engineering and design work on projects, maintenance of facilities, equipment, and infrastructure, outreach to businesses, and customer service. Over 80% of employees are working from home. Almost all of the volunteer firefighters are active and available for service. Outside work crews are working in shifts and maintaining social distance. The mayors and regional chair and various senior staff meet regularly electronically with their counterparts. Members of council continue to respond to constituents' needs and interact with senior staff. Council will be receiving a report at the beginning of May, apprising us and the public of the financial implications on the municipality of the COVID-19 emergency. Vandalism. There have been a number of incidents of vandalism in a variety of areas of town over the past couple of weeks. I cannot imagine what possesses someone to deface the property of others, including the community. I cannot imagine a more senseless act. It benefits no one. In response, the town will be erecting security cameras in select locations to ensure that should this type of conduct persist, the perpetrators will be found out and appropriately dealt with by the law. And then finally, I wanted to make some comments about volunteers. There have been many volunteers and frequent good works that have taken place in Fort Erie over the past month. Many of the nonprofit organizations in town have also suffered a loss of critical revenues with the closure of the bingo halls. Many individuals and some businesses and developers have offered assistance to them in this stressful time. I want to thank everyone who has been generous in a time when we are all feeling overwhelmed. And I encourage those of you who can to make a donation to a service club, charity, food bank, or nonprofit organization of your choice. Some service clubs, and I hesitate to mention any specifically, but I'm aware of the Ridgeway Lions who are offering meals to those in need, pickup and curbside delivery, and they're delivering about 350 meals 3 times a week. And the Canets, who have offered to offset the cost of some of our healthcare providers who require accommodations away from home because of the hours that they're working and their concern about spreading the virus to their families. And they have done what the service clubs have done, what they always do, as have the other service clubs. They've stepped up to serve our community. The food banks are struggling to maintain inventory for all those in need. Those and other community organizations have been receiving donations and offers of assistance from across our town. To all the members of the service clubs and organizations, to each generous individual and business, to everyone who is trying to brighten the day for those around you, to our healthcare providers, first responders, and essential workers, I say thank you, thank you, thank you. The council, your family, friends, and neighbors are truly appreciative. We will overcome this crisis, and because of all of you, we will do it sooner and with a sense of optimism. That takes us to declarations of pecuniary interest. Are there any? Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a declaration of pecuniary interest to IS-21-2020 as my business does business with Circle P Paving.
Okay, are there any others? So when we deal with that, and that is so that's not the consent agenda, so we can deal with that, and your declaration is noted. There are no other declarations of pecuniary interest? Then we'll go to notice of upcoming public meetings. The one with respect to the Town Line Road application has been postponed until such time as we can adequately have a public meeting. And at this stage, electronically doesn't seem to be appropriate when we know that there will be many individuals who want to address council. So we'll be monitoring that. For the time being, it's continuing to be postponed. That then takes us to the Regional Council report. Councillor Encina, it's nice to see you.
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. Good to see everyone there. Things have been a bit different with regards to the region. As an update, Regional Council has had a letter sent of support for Lake Ontario Express Incorporated project to the City of Toronto. The request is for the City of Toronto to allow this company to have a dedicated dock in the Inner Harbor. The Lake Ontario Express Incorporated team is planning to operate a hovercraft service to and from St. Catharines to Toronto. It's anticipated that schedules for Metrolinx and the Niagara Regional Transit will be incorporated into the planning. One of the major benefits of this project is the potential to remove a significant number of vehicles off the road, traveling back and forth to Niagara to the GTA. 2 hovercrafts will be utilized with the capacity of approximately 150 to 200 persons per trip. There is no cost to the taxpayers here in the Niagara region in Fort Erie. This venture is apparently self-funded. The service is planned to run 24/7 with trips back and forth lasting about 30 minutes. So not only is it saving time for everyone, it's even beneficial for the environment. The region is moving forward with the Vision Zero road safety program. A part of the program revolves around the use of automated speed enforcement technology, radar detectors, or radar enforcement areas. There will be a combined use of mobile and semi-fixed ASE assets throughout the region. The first phase is to put them in school safety zones along with community safety zones that will be established. There were several criteria that were looked at in order to find the best locations for this technology. In each of the zones that will be chosen, there will be signage identifying the type of zone and the assets that are in use. It should be noted that the Niagara region has one of the highest fatal collision rates per 100,000 people. That being said, Central Avenue in Fort Erie, from Bertie Street to Gilmore Road, has been designated as a school safety zone. Automated speed enforcement assets will be placed in that area. The timeline for this is now on hold, as everyone can expect. Everything has been changing. So when this starts and when signage and everything is about to take place, I will ensure council is informed about how things are going to progress. At the Niagara Regional Housing Board of Directors, we had a meeting with staff, and they were requested to put a plan together in place for housing once the pandemic restrictions are lifted. It was agreed that we at least have 5 projects ready to go in order to take advantage of any and all stimulus funding from the federal and provincial governments that will be put forward. It's hoped that nonprofit organizations wishing to take advantage of this will come forward and partner with Niagara Regional Housing. One of the big things that we wanted to do is, when they say go, we have shovel-ready projects that we can actually say to the province and the federal government, we're ready, give us the funding, we'll start now. I would just like to take this time, if you wouldn't mind, indulge me in thanking everyone, all our first responders, everybody who has to deal with the public and keeping our food chains moving. And as a member of the community, I would also like to thank and convey my thanks to everyone around the screen, as they call it, the bots, just for the work that you're doing and the leadership that you're providing everybody here in our community. I thank you for that. Mr. Mayor, that's all. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, feel free.
Okay, so can you hear me now? Okay, thank you very much. It's too bad you didn't speak louder when you were praising us, or that we couldn't hear you better. Are there any members of council that have any questions of the regional councillor? Then concise as usual, Councillor Dubanow, do you have your hand up? Please proceed.
Yeah, I do, Your Worship. Thank you very much. Councillor Encina, it's very good to see you. I hope you're doing well. Awesome. Yeah, just with regard to the automated speed enforcement, I did see your little publication in the paper, and I noted that it had mentioned Central Avenue. I'm just curious, do you have a bit of information about why Central Avenue was selected rather than other locations such as Garrison Road? I'm curious just on traffic volumes and just on what I personally observe and what I've seen walking the kids to school. And my perception is that Garrison Road has always been a little more of a kind of a dicier area in the mornings with traffic rather than Central Avenue. And I'm just wondering if you can maybe explain, or at least find out later maybe, that the rationale as to why Central Avenue was selected.
Sure. I know there were several criteria that they looked at. A lot of it was involved in statistics with regards to traffic enforcement that has already taken place. So one of the things that they looked at was Our Lady of Victory. Actually sort of stood out with statistically all the stats on that area with regards to the school. So that was, this is just the first start. What I will do is to get a hold of the criteria. I should have made a few more notes, but I will actually send them out to you as they progress even further, because when they start rolling out to the community safety zones, I would expect that there are going to be a few more, and I would like to see one up towards Garrison Road too. but I will get that information to you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Encina, and I do appreciate that, and I'm sure the and if I may, Your Worship, just quickly, I personally I've never been a big fan of red light not red light cameras, but photo radar, but I'm keeping an open mind, and we'll see what happens. So if you could send that criteria out and keep us updated as to what's going on, I personally would appreciate that, and I know my constituents would as well. Thank you very much for everything you do, Tom. It's much appreciated.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dubanow. And I might say that when we expressed appreciation for the crossing guards a couple of months ago, I sat down and chatted with some of them. Some of the stories that they relate with respect to driving conduct is pretty unbelievable. It's extremely dangerous, and this particular corridor was one of the locations that they indicated some of the worst offenses were occurring. So I think all of us shy away from the use of technology to monitor conduct, but this I think is required. Anyways, thank you, Councillor Encina. Is there any other councillor that has any other questions of the regional councillor? If not, then we're going to move on to presentations and delegations. There are none. They're all being deferred pending the completion of this crisis, or until a time when we can receive electronic presentations, which takes us to the consent agenda. And the clerk pointed out to me that we actually have a resolution under correspondence proclaiming National Day of Mourning. It's item 2C, 9.2C in our agenda. And Councillor Dubanow, you have the resolution for with respect to the consent agenda. Are there any items that anyone wishes removed from the consent agenda? Councillor McDermott. I think you're on mute. I think you're on mute. There you go.
Okay, Your Worship, I just want to make a comment on Traffic Coordinating Committee.
Okay, so we're not there yet. We're not quite there yet. Did you want to remove that item from the agenda?
Yes, please.
Okay, so that would be item 393B. We'll take that out of the consent agenda. Are there any other items? Okay, Councillor Dubanow, could you proceed with the consent agenda resolution with the exception of 9.3B?
Your Worship, just really quick, I believe Councillor Butler, she had a, did she have a conflict on, I think it was IS?
She has IS 21, which is...
Oh, that's, sorry, my mistake.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
Reports. Okay, fair enough. And that was, which one we were removing again? I apologize.
9.3B.
Okay, thank you. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McDermott, that Council approves the consent agenda with the exception of item 9.3B as recommended.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments with respect to the items in the consent agenda? Councillor Noyes.
Yes, I have a few questions on a few of them.
Sure.
PDS 19-2020. That is the bylaw statistical reporting, and I did have a chance to talk to Kira earlier today about it, because as you could see that the bylaw enforcement numbers were doubled, if not more than doubled, in regards to bylaw enforcement. And I asked if the Airbnb, because we put out the rules and regulations and encouraged the public to let us know if there was a problem with that, was part of that, and it probably was part of it, but it wasn't separated from it. So we still really don't know what the Airbnb, and I understand from Ms. Dolch that is coming forward on the next one. They'll start pulling it out, that if the complaint is directed, like a noise complaint or a waste complaint or whatever, is directed to an Airbnb, it will be taken out in the future, like starting this year.
So you're actually talking about short-term rentals in general?
Yes, short-term rentals. I'm using the old term, or the common term, I guess. So that will be done in the future. And my other comment was on PDS 2020, the urban boundary expansion in regards to the provincial policy statements. And I had a chance to talk to Ms. Dolch also about this. And basically, I'm wondering if she can perhaps give us some background or some information, because I understand there's a different interpretation between different municipalities in the region. So about the 40 hectares and also about whether it's going to help us, or pros and cons of this policy changes, how it's going to affect Fort Erie.
Sure. Ms. Dolch.
Thank you. Through you to the councillor. The urban boundary expansion section in the new PPS starts to talk about land swapping. Under the previous growth plan, new policies, they talk about a 40-hectare expansion and allow it independent of land swapping. So there is a bit of a change in the PPS. The question is whether or not the growth plan trumps the PPS. In my opinion, the policies in the growth plan are the more detailed policies, and that they should take precedence. But I do understand from my regional counterparts, and we are having a discussion later this week, that if we do choose, let's say, our urban boundary expansion for the industrial area, that may be our only urban boundary expansion, 40-hectare urban boundary expansion, whereas originally the province kind of guided us to say that there could be multiple 40-hectare expansions. So again, we still have to have some further discussions on that, but there could be a caution there. And once I get that detailed information from the region, I will pass it along to council once I know more.
Councillor Noyes.
Thank you for that explanation. I have another question in regards to IS 22-2020 in regards to the street sweeping.
Yep.
And I understand the change there is that we're no longer going to have a town vehicle following it to make sure, like if it backs up and that there's now safety features built inside the machine itself and inside the sweeper. And I'm just wondering, is there any way that those safeguards can be turned off?
Mr. Walsh. Did you hear the question?
Sorry, my computer's a little laggy.
Councillor Noyes, did you hear the question?
Yeah, I've got it. I'm not sure of that. Typically, it's a convoluted process to turn safety features off. I know from our own equipment, it's very difficult, but I will find that out and get back to you on that.
I would appreciate. I know that in some of the new vehicles that have all these, bells and whistles, that it's pretty easy to turn them off. And I know my husband doesn't like some of them, and I like all of them. So I know I always have to check which ones he's turned off and which ones he's left on. So I'm just hoping that if they can't be turned off, that's great. If they can be turned off, I think maybe we have to ensure that they're not turned off, and that and I don't think the vendor would do it. Maybe one of the drivers may.
Mr. Walsh, will you circulate that information to all members of council?
Certainly.
And just before we leave this, how much money are we saving by not having to utilize a spotter at the rear of the equipment?
I don't have that amount, but it's full-time employee plus vehicle costs for a month at a time, or however long the sweeper is out there. It's not an insignificant amount of money.
Okay, and you'll pass that on to members of council as well?
Certainly.
Okay, Councillor Noyes, you still have the floor.
No, that's all. Thank you.
Okay, any other members of council have any questions with respect to Councillor Butler?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have a quick question with respect to IS 22-2020 with the street sweeping tender award. Not so much, the award itself, but I had a question come up with the Bridgeway BIA, and they wanted to know, when will the street actually be swept in the downtown core?
Mr. Walsh.
In our mind, the street sweeping is a non-essential service right now. So until the province lifts its ban on non-essential services, I can't answer that.
All right, so that's, Councillor Butler, for your edification, this is typically something that's discussed at the Emergency Operations Center meetings every now Monday and Thursday mornings, so that as the situation changes, we'll be discussing that, among other things, as I mentioned, the boat launches and the beaches, etc. So the town of Fort Erie's position has been that construction work, unless it relates to safety, is not essential. I don't know whether you wanted to add anything, Mr. Cookett.
No, that's captured it at this point. That's our decision is not to proceed with a lot of those capital projects. We're waiting to hear from the province. I would think in the next few weeks they'll make a decision. Their non-essential list is changing all the time, and we monitor that daily. So we're taking our direction from them for the most part.
Councillor Butler?
Yes, thank you. It's just a shame because the streets are empty from the cars, so it would be perfect to get that done quickly.
Great time to be plowing snow too.
Yeah, thank you.
Are there any other councillors that have any questions with respect to the consent agenda items? Ms. Dolch, I had with respect to the report regarding the development, just wanted to ask a question about with the change in the provincial policy statements regarding inventory requirements, how do we match up now? I mean, according to report PDS 19, we're in good standing in terms of our planning supply, our residential land supply, our residential unit supply. Those numbers are all changing as of May the 1st. How do we fit with respect to the new numbers?
I haven't looked in terms of the new numbers. I do know they've increased. So rather than, I believe right now we have a 10-year supply. We have a 8.8-year supply for draft approved plans. That's increased now. So we're going to have to, when we do the Q1, we'll have to start looking at the new numbers and assessing based on 2020 numbers moving forward.
Right. And you'll keep us apprised of your findings.
Yes.
Okay. If there are no other questions or comments with respect to the items in the consent agenda, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the resolution? Any opposed? Okay, so that's carried. That takes us then back to 9.3B. Councillor Dubanow, could you move that?
Yes, I can, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McDermott, that Council approves consent agenda item 9.3B as recommended.
Councillor McDermott, you had questions or comments? You're muted.
Not certain why that's happening. There we go. Am I good now? Okay. So, no, I just wanted to thank Mr. Walsh and the Traffic Coordinating Committee about approving these 3 extra parking spaces on Clark Street. Certainly appreciated by myself and the BIA, and we've had to wait a while for it, but I'm certainly appreciative of it.
Great, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments with respect to the Traffic Coordinating Committee minutes, which are quite lengthy? If not, all those in favor of the resolution? None opposed, that is carried. That then takes us to reports, and the first report is the award of tender for the replacement of park signage, contract number ISF 20T WAYF17. Councillor Lubberts, this is your motion, and I presume that you're moving that council accepts and approves the tender submission from 774459 Ontario Inc., operating a signature sign and image for the replacement of park signage, contract number ISF 20T WAYF17 in the amount of $239,560, including 13% HST. And further, the council authorizes and approves an amendment to the 2020 capital budget to supplement the replacement of park signage, contract number ISF 20T WAYF17 by $110,000 from the road refurbishing reserve. Are you moving that, Councillor Lubberts?
Yes, and I'm looking for a seconder.
Yep, we have a seconder, Councillor McDermott. Are there any questions or comments with respect to that report? Councillor, or Mr. Walsh, I note that there will be some potential savings with respect to the contract. The report identifies about $29,600 plus HST by reducing some aspects of the work to be performed. And I understand that the usual protocol is for council to approve the tender, and then staff can negotiate and finalize any reductions or savings during the course of finalizing the execution of the contract.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, and ultimately this would come before the mayor and the clerk to sign, so we would be seeing the final numbers.
The contract that you'll sign will be based on the tender, not the amended. The changes we're suggesting will be affected through a change order, which is the normal course of business as we undertake a contract.
So when the contract comes forward for execution by the clerk and me, would you be able to provide a memo as to the extent of the negotiations, or maybe even a copy of the change order that you're contemplating,
Yes.
whether it's finalized or not?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? All those in favor of the resolution? Let me see. Councillor Butler, you had your hand up. Okay, none opposed. Okay, that takes us to the next report, which is IS 2020-20, and Councillor Zanko, you have that resolution.
Yes, I do. Your worship, thank you. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Dubanow, that council amends the 2020 capital budget to include the design for the Point Avenue Road South reinstatement of the shoreline protection and road reconstruction for $491,459.92 with funding from the Emergency Management Reserve.
Are there any questions or comments with respect to that report? Mr. Walsh, we'd received an email at the end of last week with respect to the potential to widen the road to include some type of recreation trail along the one side. My understanding is that there's some ownership issues relative to this particular road.
There are 2 or 3 properties about mid-block where the road allowance becomes discontinuous, in that the private property extends right to the lakefront. As part of our design, we'll look into issues we can take across those properties in particular, including the eventual purchase of what we need there.
Okay. And the design that we're contemplating, does that include a road that would be wide enough to accommodate any type of pedestrian or bicycle usage along the one side of the road?
If it's identified in our active transportation master plan, we'll consider it. That identified the need for sidewalks and trails, high priority areas.
Right.
If it's not in there, we can look into it, but I can't promise anything right now.
Right. My recollection is that we had significant sums of money that were identified in that study that we've deferred so that staff can provide us with a report on how we would manage those costs along with the costs of the other strategic objectives that we've identified for this term of council. So additional work, I guess, would be pretty daunting at this stage unless it's identified. That's your position.
Well, we'll have to see through the design. It may be easy, it may not be.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. Are there any questions arising out of that little exchange? All right, all those in favor of the resolution? None opposed, that is carried. That takes us then to report IS 21-2020. And again, Councillor Lubberts, this is your resolution.
Yeah, I have it here.
You have it?
Yeah, I need a seconder.
Who's your seconder? Councillor McDermott.
Yes, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McDermott. That council extends the contract with Circle P Paving, contract number ISO 19T AUCR for the completion of the 2020 asphalt utility cut reinstatement program in the amount of $240,238.34, including 13% HST.
Are there any questions or comments with respect to that report? If not, I'll call the question. All those in favor? I lost Councillor Butler. Oh, she has a pecuniary interest. Sorry, that is carried. That then takes us to new business inquiries, and there is a proclamation under new business, and Councillor Butler, you have that resolution.
Yes, sorry. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McDermott. Whereas 12.7 million Canadian volunteers give their time to help others, contributing close to 2 billion volunteer hours per year. And whereas the collective result of the work done by our volunteers is that the town of Fort Erie is a more desirable place to live. Now, therefore, be it resolved that Council proclaims April 19th to the 25th, 2020 as National Volunteer Week. It's time to applaud this country's volunteers, and further, that Council expresses their appreciation and gratitude to all volunteers in the town of Fort Erie for their service, dedication, and commitment to our community.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. And I should point out that we were going to host a volunteer appreciation reception this week on April the 22nd, but of course, that's been canceled. Do any members of council have any comments with respect to the resolution? Councillor Lubberts.
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Redekop. Just a question as to not only are we going to recognize our volunteers, but do we have some type of flag that we fly for volunteers? And if not, is it possible that maybe we could do the same thing as we do with other organizations and fly a volunteer flag at Town Hall for this week?
I don't think we have a specific volunteer flag, but I'll ask the clerk.
It might be something that we could take all the service clubs and ask people to design one. Maybe we can have one made up for next year.
Well, how about if I refer that to the clerk and she can take that under advisement?
We don't currently have a flag, although I can have our legislative assistant look into it with the national organization, because they might have something that maybe we can use, and then we could add it to our flag protocol.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. If there are no other questions or comments, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the resolution? None opposed, that is carried. Are there any inquiries or items of new business? Councillor Butler and then Councillor McDermott.
Thank you, Your Worship. We've been receiving some phone calls, and well, I've been receiving some phone calls, and we have been receiving some emails with respect to the SPCA. And I just wondered, I know that we've had some discussions privately with respect to getting some information from the SPCA. Is there an opportunity to get a copy of their financials where we're concerned and how that disbursement is being handled?
I'm going to refer that to Mr. Cookett. I know that we, just for clarity, we contract with the SPCA for animal control. They have a variety of other activities, so I don't know, but Mr. Cookett, the request is for the SPCA to provide us with a copy of their financial statements. I mean, they might even be public documents.
Through your worship to the councillor, I believe they are public documents. They do a formal audit annually. As the mayor noted, we hire them for for animal control, not for animal sheltering. Those are the services that we provide. Just so that everybody's aware that we did receive complaints it's probably been a month and a half ago now. I have met with them. I've taken some notes. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to compile the information because I do want to share it with council, because there's been a lot discussed out there, be it through social media and have other areas. So I do want to get that to you. I will share that through an email as soon as I get an opportunity. I'm hoping this week I can share it with you. I will reach out to them and ask if they can provide their audit, and I will forward that on if they don't have any issues with it, which I'm sure they won't.
Councillor Butler?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Any Councillor McDermott, you're next.
Can't hear you.
You're on mute.
Oh, there we go. Okay, Your Worship, yes, I wanted to get some clarification. I know we just talked about the boat ramps, and I just wondered if maybe Mr. Cookett could look into the fact that Just the other day, the Premier had assured the public there would be a fishing season this year. Now, that gets confusing, and I've had probably 9 phone calls and an email with regards to this today. So I'm just wondering, because of the fact that we're getting a mismessage here, the Premier saying one thing and also closing boat ramps at the same time, I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. I don't have any trouble with boat ramps being closed. But if the Premier is saying there's going to be a fishing season, you would think that wouldn't just be, fishing along the river. You figure that would mean boats as well, because there's derbies of all kinds of type. I would just like to get a clarification as to where the provincial government stands on that issue. If Mr. Cook would be able to.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough, Councillor McDermott. I think the Premier may have opined on that. He hasn't indicated when, but Mr. Cookett, you and I were discussing this prior to the council meeting, because I think all of us are getting some communications relative to fishermen wanting to get out onto the lake. Can you comment?
Certainly. To you, your worship, to the councillor. So the last set of orders that I saw that came down from the province was the ordering of closure of all boat launches, the beach, public and the marinas as well. So that's what we did. We closed our boat launches. And as of Friday, I know the Niagara Parks have closed those as well. So their boat launches are all closed.
We're having some trouble hearing you, Mr. Cookett.
Okay, is that better? Can you hear me?
Yeah. Could you repeat what you said?
Yes, certainly. So the last orders that came down from the province directed us to close our boat launch and the marinas as well. And that's what we did. And Niagara Parks did the same as of Friday. You can fish. Anybody can fish along the shores, along the river, so forth, small lake. I've heard in the conversation today that maybe the boat launch is open now. And I'm going to look into that. I just heard that late today. I'm going to look into it. There seems to be some confusion that the launches can be open according to the province. So I'm going to look into that. I don't believe that's true. I still believe that they are to be closed. But I'll confirm that. But as it stands right now, they will remain closed. People can fish along shores, riverbanks, and so forth, as long as they abide by social distancing as far as no groups bigger than 105.
So unfortunately, Mr. Cookett, we heard about half of what you said, but I believe essentially what you're saying, what you have said is that the boat launches and marinas are closed for now. The Parks Commission has indicated that theirs are all closed. They have indicated that theirs will open when the province eases up on its restrictions. And as I mentioned in my opening comments, this is something that's changing, as is the issue with respect to beaches. So we pretty much discuss this every Emergency Operations Center group meeting, and we'll be doing the same thing here. We understand people want to get out and fish, and we understand that they need some diversions right now. The context will be safety and social distancing. So we will be reviewing that, and council will be kept apprised as to what we find out. And in the meantime, Mr. Cookett and Ms. Dolch can clarify what the situation is as far as the province is concerned. Anything further, Councillor McDermott?
No, thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Dubanow.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. And just to touch on what Councillor McDermott had mentioned, I actually did have a constituent reach out to me today who forwarded me an email from our member of provincial parliament's office that said that there was no provincial directive in place that required boat launches to be closed, and that it was actually up to the individual municipalities. So I appreciate what Mr. Cookett had mentioned, and I certainly hope that we can maybe get some clarification here. I'm sure, we're acting in good faith, and I'm sure, Mr. Gates's office, he's acting in good faith as well. It's just confusion like this obviously leads to, perception among residents that, who's doing what and who's got the right info. So that's something that I certainly hope we can have sorted out, at least by the next emergency operations meeting on Thursday. And if I may continue, Your Worship, with
just before you leave that particular point, it needs to be clear as well that the boat launches on the river are under the control of the Niagara Parks Commission. And so we have communication with them as well. And what we would try to do, as well as with the other municipalities in Niagara, is try to act in some type of uniform fashion.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned that, Your Worship. That's an excellent point. And just like Councillor McDermott said, I've had a lot of people reach out to me, some that have mentioned concern about being able to provide groceries because they use the lake to supplement, through fish. We're very fortunate that we have that available to us. So I hope we can get to a resolution. But I just want to mention briefly that from the bottom of my heart, I appreciate everything that our staff have done, right from the CAO and the directors, right down to our bylaw staff and everyone. I think we have struck a very good balance between the aspect of education and ensuring people are aware of why these rules exist, rather than a more heavy-handed approach that you may have read about in the newspapers and other municipalities where someone just touches a park bench and ends up with an $880 fine. And I'm glad we're not doing that because I think there was something Dr. Bonnie Henry said. She's the chief public health official for British Columbia. And some may say that they have had a very excellent response to the pandemic. She said, no one knows any individual situation. No one knows, to touch on earlier, we don't know why American plates are driving down our streets. They could be residents who are using cars. There's people who move back and forth. There's Canadian citizens who live in the United States who have a legal right to enter Canada that we can't deny entry to. So I think the response for our municipality has been fantastic. And I think, just to touch on a point, I think we need to be compassionate. We need to understand that we're all dealing with this as best we can every day, one day at a time. And that, the sanctimonious judgment, some of the stuff you see on social media, I think is inappropriate. Just we're going to get through this. It's going to take time. But I just want to extend my appreciation to town staff for how they've handled this. I think it's been excellent. And to my council colleagues and regional councillor in Senate, thank you so much for everything you guys do. This has been tough, but starting to see some light at the end of the tunnel. And I think we've done a good job. So thank you, everyone.
Those are very good comments, Councillor Dubanow, and they're reflective as well, I think, of a lot of the messages that we're receiving from members of the public. Most of them are inquiries. They get responses from us. Most of the responses, even if they don't agree with us, are generally well-mannered. So, there's a lot to be said for the community as well. But the staff, the public doesn't have an appreciation of how much the staff has been involved. They know that the building's closed. They think that there's nobody here, but the reality is the work continues and there's been a lot of work going on. Councillor Noyes, you had your hand up as well.
Yes, I just wanted to comment that we've now got more information from the public health in regards to COVID-19 stats and things. And one of the stats that jumped out at me, that 20% of those that have tested positive are healthcare providers. And I'm thinking that's an important message that we get out to the public. How important it is for self-isolation, and that the caregivers, the healthcare providers are at the front lines. And again, 20% of our current cases are healthcare providers. And
yeah, that's a good comment, and you're quite correct. Last week they did, following the meeting that the mayors had with and the chair, there was some changes made, but I think that there's still additional information that we require. There was a quite detailed message from public health last week as well. And the concern that I expressed was that it'd be helpful if we had more data that would support some of the comments that were being made, which are quite right. We now have that stat. We do have information relative to places where there have been COVID-19 or potential COVID-19 outbreaks, but no real other specific information as to how many. Some of the regions have information that identifies numbers of both staff and residents who have been affected. Some websites actually break down, some regional websites break down by municipality where the cases have been occurring. So we'll get there at some point, I'm sure. Anything further by any member of council? Okay, there are no motions this evening. Are there any notices of motion? Councillor McDermott.
Yes, Your Worship. I will be putting forward a notice of motion with regards to the closures on the bridge. I know the Prime Minister has extended this period of time for essential traffic only up to 28 days. But I think as a municipality and a border town, we're going to have to give him the word that, you know, it's a case of where the United States has not done quite enough yet. And as you can see by all the chaos in the cities, they're still not separating each other. They're protesting about opening up things. And this could prove to be a huge risk to Canadians. And so I would like to see, I will put a motion together. I believe that they have to do a lot more to flatten the curve than they're doing. And allowing these mega protests out there is just going to increase this virus in their different communities. Of course, I don't wish that on anybody, but I have to make sure as a councillor that I'm doing my due diligence to take care of our community and our country. And I think that we're going to have to keep an eye on this and let the Prime Minister know how we really feel with regards to how it is on a border town and what we believe is something that's going to make people safe here in this country.
Yep, that's good. Now, Councillor McDermott, if you can put that together, I know that that Mr. Cooken and I talked about another resolution that we wanted to advance with respect to the Niagara Parks Commission, and maybe we could call a regular or a special council meeting on May the 4th, which is May the 4th. Our next, our next council and committee meeting, we could perhaps call a special council meeting to deal with a couple of resolutions. That would be timely because May the 4th would be in advance of the extension of the border closure, which is I think around May the 13th or 14th. So if you can put that together. Okay, perfect. Are there any other notices of motion? There being none, then that takes us to consideration of bylaws. And Councillor Noyes, are there any bylaws that anyone wishes removed from the package? Councillor McDermott?
Yes, just a comment on the 43-2020.
We're not there yet.
I know.
We have to pass. Okay, so Councillor Noyes, you have the resolution for first and second reading.
Yes, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Zanko, that the bylaw package containing 42-2020 to assume secondary services to the Village Creek subdivision phase 2, stage 1 plan 59M-390 in brackets 800547 Ontario Limited, Deborah Hill. Bylaw 43-2020 to accept and declare lands as public highway on the west side of Burley Road North, 615 Burley Road North, Christine Watson. Bylaw 44-2020 to amend traffic bylaw number 2089 to provide for parking on the west side of Pluck Street. And bylaw number 45-2020 to amend Council's Rules of Procedure bylaw number 36-2016 as amended emergency electronic meetings, local boards is given first and second read.
All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. So that bylaw package is on the floor for questions and comments. Councillor McDermott.
Yes, Your Worship. I just wanted to say that 43-2020 I'll certainly support. I just would like to offer Christina Watson my sincere condolences on the loss of her husband, David, and to both the Watson and Stark families.
Thank you very much, Councillor McDermott. Are there any other questions or comments with respect to the package? If not, Councillor Butler, you have third and final reading.
Councillor Dubanow.
Sorry?
Yeah, I had a quick comment, Your Worship.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. I'm just quiet over here.
Wave more vigorously.
Just a quick comment regarding 45-2020 to enable local boards and committees to be able to have like video meetings over Zoom like this. I think that's a fantastic idea. I know we ran into a concern with one of the committees that I sit on that we needed input from members to proceed regarding changes to transit. I think this is a good idea. We don't know how long, even if restrictions are lifted, it could be more prudent to maintain as much distance as possible as we move forward with some return to normalcy. So I'm very pleased to see this bylaw here. It'll help to get some continuity and help return us to regular business, even if we're doing it a little differently.
Just for clarification, Councillor Dubanow, this would apply to boards, wouldn't apply to advisory committees, so that the advisory committees are still in a situation where they're not going to be authorized to hold formal meetings. This is of particular interest with respect to a board like the Committee of Adjustment, where there are applications that are pending, and if we can determine how we can ensure that those who want to have representation at a Committee of Adjustment hearing can do so, then we could proceed. But that's all under review right now.
And that's fantastic. My comment still stands. Anything we can do to try and move this along to some level of normalcy I think is fantastic. And perhaps, even with the issue with advisory committees, maybe that is something we can look at in the future if it's logistically possible. But I think this is important to try and get the continuity and have the municipality function as normally as possible, despite the challenges we're facing right now.
Yep, I quite agree. Any other questions or comments with respect to any of the reports before I go to Councillor Butler for third and final reading? If not, Councillor Butler, please proceed.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McDermott that bylaws 42-2020, 43-2020, 44-2020, and 45-2020 are given third and final reading to be signed by the Mayor and Clerk under the corporate seal.
Any questions or comments? All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. Councillor Zanko, you have the next resolution, which is first and second reading of the confirmatory bylaw.
Yes, I do. Thank you. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Noyes. Did you want to second this one? Councillor Noyes, that bylaw number 46-2020 to confirm the actions of council at its council and committee meeting held on April the 6th, 2020, and its council meeting held on April 20th, 2020 is given first and second reading.
All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. Councillor McDermott, you have third and final reading.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Dubanow, that bylaw number 46-2020 is given third and final reading to be signed by the Mayor and Clerk under the corporate seal.
Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. That takes us to scheduling of meetings. There is an Emergency Operations Center group meeting on Thursday morning at 9 a.m. There's a regional council meeting on Thursday evening starting at 6:30 p.m. That will be done electronically, and that should be fun with 32 members and umpteen staff. Fun will just begin. Any other meetings that anyone wishes to refer to? Councillor Noyes.
Yes, there's a planning development meeting on April 29th at 4 p.m. I would imagine it will also be an electronic meeting.
Right. Any others? Is there an infrastructure services meeting coming up?
No.
Okay. Okay. If there are no other meetings, then Councillor Dubanow, you have the honors.
Actually, if I may quickly, Your Worship, just with regard to the scheduling of meetings, during our council and committee meeting, at that time, there was no library board meeting scheduled. However, last week, we did actually have a library board meeting hosted through Zoom on Tuesday at 5:30. It went very well, and I just wanted to get it on the record because it was kind of called at the last minute. And I think going forward, we'll probably continue with some continuity and host meetings that way. But yes, Your Worship, I would be happy to move on to the last resolution, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McDermott, that council adjourns at 7:07 p.m. to reconvene into a regular meeting of council on May 19th, 2020.
All those in favor? And that is unanimous. Thank you all.